Stupendous. Awesome. Everyone, thank you so much for your time tonight. We really appreciate it on Cyber Judo here. Tonight, what we wanted to do is Travis and myself, we were thinking about switching things up a little bit and doing a AMA, Ask Me Anything type of format. This way, what we can do is we can provide the opportunity of having you guys pick our brains across any aspects of cybersecurity and information security, because while we're conventionally known for having a lot of red team experience and doing a lot of things like pen testing and whatnot, we certainly do have a strong blue team background and a lot of experience in that domain. Specifically, folks with us here tonight, myself as well as Dennis, we actually come from an initial background of being essentially like software developers and infrastructure architects. So we were on the blue team first, building these things and defending and trying to have security concepts within all the environments kind of architected out right from the get-go before we started setting things on fire. Before we joined the dark side in setting things on fire. And certainly that's kind of the fun area and people tend to gravitate towards, and there's a lot of intrigue and interest. But I think that a lot of times people still don't give a lot of credence to all of the knowledge and expertise and hard work that goes into being on the blue team, as well as doing things like cyber threat intelligence and doing forensic analysis and all that kind of stuff. So what we did was Travis posted out a Microsoft Forms where folks could post their questions for us. We took all those questions and we deduplicated them down. So we got, it looks like a tight list of about 16 plus or minus questions here. What we'll do is we'll kind of pick and choose as we kind of go through here some of the more intriguing and interesting questions, especially ones that are a bit more nuanced, things that are a little bit more beyond the like standard fundamentals. And then what we'll do is if we get through these here, we'll open up to kind of more of a live discussion and whatnot. I would definitely say that just because we have these 16 questions that we're initially working through here, certainly post additional questions or thoughts that you guys have in mind in the chat, because for all we know, we might be on a really intriguing and interesting tangent and you ask a question about it and we keep that conversation going, right? That's what makes these really different and compelling, is the fact that we're trying to make this not just a set of presentations or taking you guys through labs or taking you through things, which is awesome. And by the way, shout out to Dennis for doing a fantastic job last week on the fundamental tools and components around web app pen testing. But we also want to make this, again, a conversation, right? So that being noted, Travis, I'm going to hand it over to you for a brief moment to fill in what I missed.
No, I don't think you missed anything, but certainly the folks that did make it to the live session, we'll prioritize the questions you put in the chat. You guys did the extra step and showed up for it, so we want to make sure that if you do have any questions, that we make sure we address those within the time. So please take advantage of that opportunity as well. But want to get started on the first one, Christian?
Sure. You know what? So I know they come in this list that's, essentially chronological, right? But I kind of want to pick more of the interesting ones first, right? And I got a really cool one here that I kind of stood out to me. Is it still safe to use password managers after the LastPass breach? Ooh, wow, wait. That is a really good question and teases the brain there, because the thing is that in the world of cybersecurity, there is no perfect solution. There is nothing that is ever foolproof, right? And so we always have to hedge our bets and what our risk appetite is to things, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is essentially just a set of trade-offs, right? So when we talk about just the fundamental concept of having a password manager, it's taking all of your really, really important passwords and storing them in one singular place. Conceptually on paper, that could be really, really bad, right? Just hearing it that way fundamentally. But then when we kind of think about how human beings tend to operate and how they tend to think, right? And when they create passwords, human beings create really, really shitty passwords, right? They're really predictable, right? They're really easy to guess, right? And they're really easy to brute force and crack and be able to get into people's accounts through password spraying attacks and through credential stuffing attacks, all that kind of stuff. So most people who are your, plain Jane type of folks who are not big technology or cybersecurity folks, who they have a lot of websites and a lot of logins for things, so their bank account and their insurance account and their retirement account, whatnot. A password manager is probably a better idea for them because they're probably more of a greater risk or threat, right, of choosing a predictable password or reusing passwords than the security or password management solution they go to use this. Now, if it was some awesome, genius person like, let's say, Dennis on our team here, he may have a really, quite endemic memory where he can remember every single unique password. He doesn't need a password manager then, right? Or maybe he creates some complex algorithm in his head, right, where only he knows that key and mechanism, right? And he can always generate passwords that mean something to him and he can remember, but not be conventionally easily understood by a malicious actor, right? So a password manager may make less sense for someone like him. That being said, conventionally, for most enterprises, for most organizations, password managers still make a lot of sense, because when you're dealing with hundreds of employees, when you're dealing with thousands of employees at scale, there's just too many people who are going to have poor password creation and sanitization habits. And a password management solution is going to help kind of get them to a choke point where it forces them into better habits and behaviors. And as well as when you run an organization, there's always going to be turnover. What happens when that person is no longer with the company and you need to gain access to the accounts that they previously were managing? Well, when they're in the corporate password management solution, you can then deactivate their account, transfer the passwords that they've created to their manager or whomever, who can then now access those websites, and the business can keep functioning as usual, right? So password managers tend to make a lot of sense for small businesses and for enterprises alike. The question is now then is, well, an online password manager or a cloud-based password manager or a local one? That's going to really come to the amount of how an organization operates, of what's their public-private cloud strategy and infrastructure strategy. But all in all, when we talk about LastPass and their specific situation, when you hear about it on paper, wow, their customer password vaults were stolen. Holy shit, everything is on fire. Not quite. So first and foremost, I don't like LastPass. I've never really liked LastPass generally as an organization. I think how they've operated previously with their marketing tactics, when they like force people's hands on free accounts and all that kind of stuff and trying to force them to pay plans, I really didn't love it, right? So I tend to be one of those types of people where a lot of times I'll talk about other solutions like KeyPass was one that I previously leveraged quite a bit in the past. There's another great open source one that's on the tip of my tongue that I can't remember right now. Dennis, you know it? I'm trying to remember. No?
I know LastPass, and then Dash.
No. I'm talking
about.
Oh,
You're talking about open source. Oh, yeah. KeyPass is probably. I use KeyPass XC personally.
Yeah, so I can't remember the other one off the top of my head right now. I'm having a brief moment of brain fatigue and brain fog, but nonetheless, so usually I'd recommend KeyPass for somebody who wants something that's open source, and if they want a local option, that kind of stuff. But 1Password is actually a solution that our organization uses comparatively, and it's cloud-based and whatnot, right? It is a risk that we manage against. But the customer password vaults that were essentially stolen by malicious actors in that most recent LastPass hack isn't the worst thing in the world. Why? Well, okay, let's kind of explain through it. So first and foremost, each one of those customer key vaults, right, that stores all those passwords, is encrypted with AES 256, right? So, okay, that's a really, really like resistant encryption algorithm, right? And even in many degrees, when it comes to doing quantum computing and trying to crack it, it's fairly quantum resistant, not perfect by any means, but that's the difference between AES 128 and 256 in all intents and purposes, is that 256 is fairly quantum resistant at this juncture, right? But also to unencrypt that password vault, right, that's AES 256 encrypted, right, the key that's leveraged and utilized is someone's password that is then hashed, and it's hashed in a very specifically computationally aggressive and intensive algorithm. It's It's a long one. PBKDF2. And so that hashing algorithm, that is probably like the standard. It's like, I would argue it's even better than bcrypt for hashing. By the way, that builds in a set of iterations. It builds in salting into it as well. So a malicious actor is going to first have to guess through a bunch of potential passwords, right? Hash it against PPKDF2, right? Then all those hashes, then they have to guess against the AES-256 encrypted vault. So the people who really have to worry about the last pass, like hack, and for all intents and purposes, is the people who are using master passwords that are really, really predictable, right? Anything is certainly less than 8 characters, that's a big problem. And also, if it was a password that you happen to reuse that has been breached on and is likely in some credential stuffing list, that would be a problem. Otherwise, most folks don't have to worry about it too much. So yes, I would tend to recommend that it is, it's still safe to use password managers. I think that it's still keen to look at a organization's track record and history, take a look at their coding practices, take a look at how they handle data breaches and security events and how security bugs are reported to them. The reason why I love 1Password in particular is because one of the main people behind it, I can't remember his last name, but his first name's Troy. He's the guy who was behind Have I Been Pwned, right? So every time they've had a quote unquote security bug or security whoopsie daisy thing, they've been absolutely transparent about it every single step of the way. They've never had any major security incidents, right? And for the most part, they don't seem to have like really aggressive conniving marketing tactics or anything like that. So that's why we have the tendency of going their route towards things, but certainly there's a ton of other fantastic solutions out there like KeePass and whatnot. So
that transparency you just said, I think that's one of the things that got people a little bit scared with this one or pissed off in general, is that they detected the breach in like August, and then when did they tell anybody about it? It was like after Thanksgiving. So at that point, they don't know how bad it is. They're like, well, shit, what am I going to do now? It's been, it's already been compromised for 2 months. I think it got people a little bit more concerned than some of the normal breaches would because of that lack of transparency.
Also, it came back to me now, my brain fog. So KeePass and Bitwarden. Bitwarden is another good open source one. Really awesome. They've been really improving the game in regards to features and functionality. They have a cloud version as well. So that's something that's worth taking a gander at. So that being said, Travis, as you went through the questions list, what was one of your favorite ones that stood out to you that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I kind of like this one here. It was actually the first one that came in. At what point of one's career do you feel that specialization makes sense? Should you start as a generalist and then decide in specialization, or should you narrow your focus more early on? Dennis, I'm curious what you would say about that.
Gosh. At what point does specialization make sense? That is a very, I will say that's a good question. It's a very hard one to answer. I will say from my experience, it's almost like you start with specialization, right? Because you don't start knowing everything. So you have to focus on one specific category to kind of get into it and then kind of branch out. At least that's what I did, right? I started with a very limited skill set. So I focused on one thing and got kind of good at it, then got, moderately comfortable, moved on to expand into different categories. As far as in-depth specialization goes, I don't know if there's any time that it's like an optimal time to do it, right? I don't know if there's any time that you're optimally ready to go into specialization, but I would say the one thing to be careful of is you don't want to stagnate for sure. So if you're specialized, you don't want to specialize in one thing and then forget everything else and then just don't ever improve on anything. Certainly, if you go into specialization, you want to be open to improving your skill set, broadening the scope even further than it already is. But I quite frankly, I don't have a good answer as far as when to go into it. I'll defer to Christian or Travis in that regard.
So I'm just going to say to the poor folks who specialize in Novell NetWare, where are they today? I have some thoughts to it, but Travis, did you want to follow up to what Dennis was thinking there?
I think that this wasn't really a tech specific question. So I'm thinking back to when I was working in Intel, and every intelligence officer, at least in the Army and I believe the Navy as well, they start as an all source, right? You learn a little bit about all the different sources because one of the main functions is to understand the bigger picture and understand how fusion can work. And then you go and specialize after that. And that kind of irritated me when I first started because I was like, oh, counterintelligence sounds so cool. I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm gonna go hunt spies. Then I got in and I learned and I learned about all these different things and I realized that's not hunting spies. It's like 4 guys that do that. What it actually is interviewing all those Germans who work on the German base because you have to do that every year. Like, and that's way less cool. So it was after I spent a few years in that all source capacity, I realized that I really liked SIGINT, signals intelligence and electronic intelligence. I wouldn't have known that that was the part of Intel that I was particularly passionate about if I didn't start in that generalist thing and get an idea of all the different areas. So I would recommend, even if it's not like the most sexiest way to go about it, get a sense of security in general or IT in general before you just dive headfirst into pen testing. If that was the motivation behind this question, Christian.
Yeah. So I'm liking a little bit of both domains. So Dennis, again, you come from a conventional blue team background, right? Very much an engineer, right? And I think you initially got your foot in the door. Did you do software development first or infrastructure first?
It's software development first.
Yeah. Okay. So same thing for myself, right? And ironically, so like I kind of spearheaded right into a specialization of network administration, which I didn't really want to do at the time. I wanted to do software development, but that was the job that came up. That was the job that somebody hired me for. So I just had to get good at it, right? And then even when I went from then technology into cybersecurity, it just started out one day like, hey, can you do a pen test? And I was like, shit, sure, I'll do a pen test, and just got into it, spearheaded that way. In reflection point to that, though, what I can say is this, is that throughout my career, when I have the moments where I'm educating people, when I'm sitting down with customers and trying to figure out a particular challenge that they have and like connecting it to the right solution that's going to fulfill that challenge and get rid of it and whatnot. It's always been my generalist expertise, right? My 10,000 foot view understanding of how the pieces connect together that set me up best for success. If I could go back and approach my career in a different way that was more pragmatic, because it wasn't pragmatic, mine was very kind of crazy and chaotic, and I'm not going to get into it, but I think certainly looking at the 10,000 foot view perspective is usually a good approach of just understanding generally what is cybersecurity about? What are the core principles that underpin it, right? What are the main domains, right? Trying to identify a couple of the different roles that might be important to you, right? And then start to choose one of those roles and specialize in it. But you at least know what other roles or what other things are adjacent to it. What other departments, what other sections, right? That role is going to interface with, because the people who do the best job at anything in life understand what they do and why they do it and how that fits into the greater picture of this, at the end of the day, you're a cog in a machine, right? We're all a cog in a machine in one way or another. But if you understand the rest of the cogs that you connect with and how that powers a greater engine, that allows you to always ask really good critical thinking questions. And anytime where there's silence in a room where people are talking about something and they're uncertain, you'll be able to speak up and say something more authoritatively, or just ask a really good question and people like, oh, that guy knows what he's fucking talking about. So my recommendation would be try to start with more of a generalist approach to things. No matter what, you're going to land on your feet somewhere specifically specialized in something, but always try to learn just outside the bleeding edges of exactly specifically what you do. You do not want to be confined to a box. You do not want to be a Novell network or Novell NetWare engineer or anything like that. Those folks didn't grow very well. Certainly, by the way, in that thought process, as you get your specialization, always think about where is that role going in 3 to 5 to 10 years, roughly. It's difficult to see out 10 years, understandably, but make sure that you're never putting yourself in the position where you're specifically tied to one specific technology or specific vendor, right? Like if you're a VMware guy, you're an awesome VMware guy, well, you want to know what? Things have been going into public cloud a lot more as of late. There's a less of a demand for VMware guys, right? There's a less of demand for traditional network infrastructure architects nowadays, right? So just make sure that you're always seeing just a little bit of the horizon of what's coming down the road for your particular job position and career path, almost everything, generally speaking, is if you are an engineer, you're going to have to know some level of programming and coding, right? That's where things are going. And if you're not at that level and you're doing more like project management, or you're a little bit higher level, like managing a program of things or managing a group of people, what I would say is get really good at asking critical thinking questions, right? That'll set you best up for success. So
that leads perfectly into another question we have here. What area of InfoSec do you see growing most over the next 1 to 3 years?
you know what? I mean, hey, Hallman, you want to chime in on that? I'd like to get your thoughts on that one, man.
InfoSec itself, where I think it's growing.
Yeah, like what specific domains within it do you think are going to grow the most?
Oh man,
It's like 1 to 3 years.
jeez, everything is so crazy right now with the quantum computing, right? Like you and I have had this discussion where encryption itself, I think, is going to be ginormous. Ciphers are going to go through the roof with the quantum computing. I think we're going to see levels of encryption we haven't seen before. I think it's already coming together, really. So I don't have too much of a good answer besides that, because you put me on the spot, but that's where I'm going with. So
Dude,
Less-
that's a
less
fantastic
cool.
answer.
I'll think less cool than quantum, but I would say just the cloud. I mean, if you listen to Microsoft's earnings call last week, they had a 31% growth in Azure last year, and that was less than what analysts were expecting. I mean, that's more and more stuff is moving there. We're seeing it with our clients all the time, moving away from on-premise things in favor of doing things in the cloud, moving away from even traditional workstations in favor of VDIs and that sort of business. So I'd say if you're, just looking for setting yourself up for a job in InfoSec, getting your foot in the door, that's not a bad place to look.
Nice. Agreed. To that, I'm gonna double down on that one. I'm gonna raise on the wager. DevSecOps, right? More and more things are moving towards cloud infrastructure, serverless, SaaS and PaaS platforms. And the fact of the matter is that DevOps has been revolutionary over the last 10, 15 years, right? People are squeezing in now the security and compliance folks into the same room as the engineers and the programmers, getting them all to play along together quite nicely, right? And with implementing security components into the software development lifecycle within each CI/CD component, continuous integration, continuous deployment, that's really important for organizations, because at the end of the day, if you're going to have everyone's going towards something as a service. And if you want to have a competitive offering that's something as a service, you need to constantly be pushing new features to it and constantly crushing those bugs. That means that you're always putting out new releases all the time, which means that the evaluation of the security controls of that SaaS platform and the code behind it needs to happen on a continuous basis. Your one-time snapshot of doing a pen test once a year on your fucking web app, right? And thinking that's going to really tell you something, right? That's not happening anymore, right? We're moving away from that. So, there's even now terminology out there. This is one of the new marketing buzzwords, PTAS, right? Penetration testing as a service, right? There's a lot of that, and I think that things will kind of go down that path and domain there. Dennis, did you want to chime into that?
I would agree that public cloud is going to be I think the bigger one that people move towards, just because I personally know how much easier it is comparatively, because we hosted systems on KVM instances and ESXi instances for ages, and it does not compare to the ease of setting something up in public cloud. I don't have to manage it. I don't have to worry about downtime. I don't have to worry about backing stuff up, obviously, but I don't have to worry about like what happens if the server room explodes, because they've got redundant backups across locations. So it's much easier. But I would say probably public cloud is going to be an area that grows.
Awesome. Real quick here, Ryan Johnson, great to see you, man. Did you want to chime into that one or no? You good? Oh, I think you're muted.
The double mute, the Zoom double mute.
Nope, not yet. too secure for his own good. Okay. Well, we'll give Ryan a few to check that one out. But that being said, here let's take a look at a couple other good ones. So we previously hit on SDLC, or I was chatting about that. Someone said, "I'm just learning how to code. At what point should I be considering SDLC principles?" Okay, someone's learning how. I don't know if this person's pursuing a very specific career path in software development and coding, or if they're pursuing a path in cybersecurity, then they're just picking up coding as part of that, which is really important, or if they have a path towards DevSecOps, like I was just talking about. That being said, I would say for a lot of, I'm going to open up to the most general and probably the biggest amount of people who this is going to mean something to: regular software developers. So if someone's looking to be a software developer and they're looking to get into that, at what point should they be considering security in the software development lifecycle principles and in the software development lifecycle? Honestly, kind of from the get-go. I mean, once someone starts to get down the fundamental concepts of, computer information science, right? And whatever the particulars are of the specific programming language that they pick up. Usually I recommend an easier one like Python first to kind of work with, right? And then from there, you can extrapolate some of the concepts and like logic, and just apply it to other programming languages, right? But I think understanding how software development, just without security, just the software development lifecycle is really, really important, because if you understand all the key components around how you maintaining the code, how you're doing revision tracking, how you interoperate with other teams as they're working on other parts of the code base for a particular application, what's the cadence and frequency for pushing out new commits, new updates, understanding various methodologies, be it if it's like a Scrum agile methodology or something else, I think are all really, really important. I would say that if someone's taking software development really, really seriously, understanding like what a Scrum Master does and all that's probably really, really helpful. But then having the security component in the software development lifecycle, I also think is really important. I would say to any just general software development person that they should really be playing around with like the OWASP cheat sheets. And here I'll just kind of drop the hyperlink to that in the chat. But that has a lot of links to the OWASP ASVS, Application Security Verification Standard, OWASP MASVS, which is the Mobile Application Security Verification Standard, and has everything lined up with your proactive control. So OWASP proactive control. So this way, as you're coding up an application, it does a thing, look at those proactive controls and you can match up to, are you building your application or are you coding with a security in mind the first time around? That's what I would usually suggest, right? So the reason why is most predominantly, it's going to put you light years ahead of your peers and give you a competitive edge, and being able to, demand a better position, demand a better salary, and be able to, like be outstanding. So beyond the obvious point that like, hey, security is good, right? We all like security, hurrah. So Travis.
For the next one?
Yeah.
All right, kind of like this one. Where do organizations go wrong that leads to so many data breaches? And I'll start that one. I've not done any forensics work. So I'm not a threat hunter, but I would say from some of the organizations that we've worked with in the past doing pen test for them and seeing where they've gone wrong that have led to some exciting to write, not so exciting to receive reports, is technical debt. Organizations, especially very large ones that have been so focused on revenue growth or expansion over the last several years, and their infrastructure to support all that from an IT standpoint has not been keeping up the pace with the developments in the rest of the organization. That has led to a lot of trouble for a lot of the big companies that we've seen, to the point where you end up with multi-billion-dollar organizations that are running mission critical software on a Windows 2000 server that everybody in the entire organization can access, which is a real thing that we saw last year. Like those things happen, as crazy as it could be, or in even just other instances of things that you wouldn't you would never imagine seeing something like quite that old or quite that seemingly negligent, given what their security budget seemingly should be. But you have to understand that the big organizations have such a massive footprint of things to manage and keep track of. It's very easy for those kind of things to slip through the cracks, or that people aren't generally even aware of them. So that would be my vote on that one. Technical debt.
I think kind of building off that, you make a really good point. The reason why technical debt exists is so anyone who is a business leader, when you run an organization, you have to hedge your revenue streams and what you're doing, the services you provide, all that kind of stuff against your risks. Every business has risks, right? Yeah, financial risks, you have risks when it comes to having to deal with taxes, right, and reporting all of that stuff correctly. You have risks when it comes to general, when I say general legal, I mean like contracts that you have with your customers, what you're promising to your customers, that kind of stuff. You have risks from a regulatory standpoint, where there are specific laws that might apply to your business depending on its jurisdiction and industry, right? And so I don't, for the longest time, technical debt has built up because CTOs and CISOs really haven't had, I think, a seat at the round table with everybody else to talk about what's the business risk appetite for their technology and security program. So I think that's a really big element starting there. Once organizations then identify that and they get the CTOs and the CISOs at the round table, then I think another big element is knowing what your fucking organization footprint is, right? If you can't do asset tracking, if you can't do people tracking, right? What makes you think you can understand what the security posture of it is and where your risks lie, right? So you have to have your finger on the pulse of where your assets are, what type of assets you have right from the get-go, right? So that probably the deployment of that. Then after that, you have to set reasonable policies across the organization that can also be met, by the way. Policies that are this pie in the sky bullshit, right? They're unachievable. And if it's unachievable, nobody's going to make it happen, right? Reasonable policies that the organization can then implement, right? That are to the point, that are not filled with a bunch of unnecessary fluff bullshit, so the policies are easy to manage and come back to and maintain, right? If they're policies that are super fucking long, they're super complex and convoluted, nobody's going to want to come back and update it and have it be accurate, right? You got to have that. And then after that, and this is probably, I would say, the element I see where things start to go a bit more awry is you have to enforce those policies, right? And back in the day, I used to be a network architect in a data center. I used to run data centers, that kind of stuff. Sometimes I could get a little bit quirky and a bit of a pain in people's ass when I enforced a policy. It came off a little bit aggressive, but if you don't enforce a policy, then people know it has no bite, so nobody gives a fuck about it, right? You got to remember, most organizations, no matter how passionate you are, it's filled with a lot of people who are just doing a job, which is fine. That's completely understandable. So when I had it, and I'd be in a data center, and I'd have all my cabling done nicely, and it would all be really well architected and easy to understand, and you'd be able to go through everything and find your exact patch panel port to your exact switch port, and you'd be able to cable it in real nicely. Some help desk guy, when he would go in and run in the data center, plug a red wire in, right, and just have it flop across the floor, and then plug it into a switch, right? So between the switch port and the switch, right? I'd see that stuff. I'd go to the data center. I just cut I cut their cable with scissors, and I'd walk out. And later they'd be going back trying to figure out what happened, why their connectivity stopped working, all that kind of stuff. And it's because they didn't follow the process. Hey, look, hey, I know it's a pain in the ass. You had to follow the guide that says you got to make the cable, and it's got to be a blue cable, and you got to label the cable, right? But that's the job we all play, because it's a data center with 1,000 servers in it, right? And if every Joe Schmo picks whatever the fuck they want to just slap in there all the time, then it's going to become, and this is the technical term for it in data center, for data center folks, or for folks who are not data center, we call it spaghetti, right? So nobody wants spaghetti, right? Not in your data center, So I would say it's the making sure organization understands the risk appetite, where cybersecurity technology sits at the table, making sure you can track your assets, making sure you have policies, then actually enforcing those policies. That's where things go wrong.
Awesome. I think a lot of the ones we've got left, we can group into a couple categories. One of them being people looking for specific training content advice, and then some of them asking about career progression. So let's do the training content ones, and then we'll jump back onto those other ones. So I'll start at the top of this list. Is Cybery worth the price? If you're not familiar with Cybery, it's an online platform. They have a free tier and a subscription tier. It's sort of like the Udemy kind of thing, except for you pay the subscription price and you get access to their whole catalog of stuff. I like it a lot. I use it. I've subscribed to it for years. Not you, this year. I subscribed to it for like a year. I think it's like $60 a month. It's good quality content. It does get updated pretty frequently. So you'll see sometimes, like if you're enrolled in a course for a long time, it might like cancel you out and then put you in a new one if that instructor like updated the thing. You don't have to buy a new one. I like that. But with anything that you're going to do, I mean, the training content is only good if you're going to use it, right? So if you're looking for something really specific, just go buy it on Udemy for like $20, right? If you're looking for just to do this one specific course thing, if you're looking for a lot of different stuff on a lot of different domains and you're gonna consistently use it, then yeah, it's worth it. I think it's worth $60 a month to me. It's also got a few cool labs in it and some practice tests and all that. It's not just video courses, but I mean, you can get a lot of value out of Try Hack Me. You can get a lot of value out of YouTube. You can get a lot of value out of the library. It's whatever you're going to go to and use based on how you're going to learn. So try it out. Use the free version first. Try it. See if you like a few of their courses that are free. I know they've got a couple Azure courses that are pretty good. I went through on their free tier last weekend, actually. Yeah, I like it. There's one here. Are there any cybersecurity degree programs that are really worth it? I don't want to spend thousands of dollars for a diploma nobody cares about. I've got 2 diplomas nobody cares about. That's a tough question. You see a lot of people back and forth about that on like LinkedIn, especially talking about which programs are worth doing, which ones are not. It's tough to say. It's popular for the Western Governors University. They have a program that has a lot of industry certifications built into it. If you're really got your heart set on doing a cybersecurity degree, that one's good, worth looking into, just because you get the certs that are name brand and the diploma. So if you need the diploma to like check a box for your employer, or you're trying to get a government job and they just arbitrarily require that you have one, sure. From my perspective though, getting in and learning all this stuff, I would have rather spent my time doing a traditional computer science degree and then pivoted into security from that, versus just doing the security program. Because I feel like those classes can be a little bit so high level in general, they're useless. And it depends on what your goals are. Yeah. Mike, Dennis, you guys any thoughts on that one?
Being a college dropout, for those of you who don't know, I went to college and the college went under, so I'm a dropout, not by choice. But I agree to the sentiment that it's my take on it almost is that certification, certainly from a practical standpoint, are more valuable, because I think that you will probably learn more going through a very intense penetration testing course than you will probably going to college. That's just my opinion. But college does have its place in the sense that it's a rounded sphere of academics. I don't know. Personal preference, I would say probably go to certificates, because you're probably going to be able to get more employer interaction in that regard, or about the same. Now, the problem is that a lot of jobs, as everyone knows, require that you have a 4-year degree, or you have to have 7 years of experience to start this entry-level position. But that being said, I think that the industry is probably going to find that moving more towards certificates or technical output is going to be more beneficial, especially considering the shortage of penetration testing jobs, or rather persons to fill penetration testing jobs across the US. There's a large shortage. I don't know if you've seen, I want to say, forget who did it, but there was an actual analysis of how many jobs were left unfilled in the cybersecurity industry, and it was some crazy number. It was a couple million. So more, or not million, a couple 100,000 probably. But it's a crazy amount of jobs that are unfilled is the point. And I don't think that employers can stay picky about college certifications, especially if people are moving more away from that. Especially the more technically minded are moving away from that, I believe. So
yeah,
I would No, go ahead, Christian.
I completely concur with that. By the way, I just want to give an example to everybody with organizations that they say they want a college diploma. Every organization nowadays is willing to ignore that, right? If they understand that technology and cybersecurity is important. That the fact of the matter is that technology and cybersecurity are one of the few domains that, and probably for a while, that'll be those things where college diploma is not really necessary. You know, someone's passion, right, is going to be the primary driver. It's like, oh, wow, you did that stuff in your free time. Oh, you were doing all that cool stuff. Like, you know, what makes, like, you know, Dennis an awesome engineer is not even, you know, some of the certifications he has, right? What makes him an awesome engineer is that he lives and breathes it every day. Some of us can't always do that. And some of us don't have that passion to that level, right? And that's where certifications can help, I think, kind of bridge a little bit of that gap and help demonstrate the value proposition of folks and whatnot. But I mean, I'll give you guys a example of the biggest corporatocracy turning a blind eye, right? So you guys have probably heard of KPMG, or one of the big four, right? Way back many years ago, I was looking to get a position at KPMG. I got offered a position at KPMG, right? Nice, big, you know, global wide management role for infrastructure and network stuff, right? And I have no college diploma. I went to a 2-year college and I dropped out of my 2-year college. And actually, previous to that, I went to high school and I actually dropped out of my high school. Now, I did the rest of my high school curriculum at a homeschooling program for like 1 year and that kind of stuff. And when I went to community college, I was 16, right? But I what it was is I just wanted to get into data centers. I just wanted to get my hands into things, right? And they were a perfect example of an organization where that's like, hey, you preferred to have a master's degree and blah, 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 blah. When they saw the passion, right, and they saw the expertise, they're like, yeah, okay, this doesn't really matter, right? So I would say this is that for anybody who is maybe worried a little bit about the college stuff, make sure that the rest of your resume speaks volumes about your expertise and your passion in other ways, talking about, you know, your skills, right? Talking about pet projects, linking back to your GitHub and showing some of the cool shit that you're working on and whatnot. That is going to get you way farther than just having another college degree. Everyone in their grandma kind of has a college degree, and not having one, it seems to be in itself sometimes actually something, a way to differentiate yourself as a black sheep. So
much good work for the government. That they were serious about the college degree, but no matter what you know, it matters that you can prove someone told you once.
So we, you know, that kind of, I guess, segues into this next one. Is it better in terms of long-term career progression to find an entry-level cybersecurity job or start in IT and then move into security? Oh, that's a really interesting one. So Dennis, we should give you the opportunity to talk about this one first, because you have a lot of experience in it, right?
Yeah. I knew it was going to come to me when they said IT to cyber. I was like, oh yeah, this is going to me. But yeah, no, I had that experience. So basically, I would say it is, and I've had this conversation with Lou on our team as well. We actually talk about whether or not this was a benefit or not. I personally believe that there is some benefit going IT into cybersecurity. And the reason why I think that there is some benefit is because, number one, you learn how the systems work on the back end, right? I think that if you're going to live and breathe the machine, right? If you're going to understand why things work the way that they do, how systems interact, it gives you a lot of insight if you set up those systems or you maintain those systems. I did that for, I want to say 5 years before coming to wonderful Gotham Security now. And across those 5 years, we did a lot of administration over a lot of different system types, mostly because where I was working, we would acquire other smaller medical practices and they'd be running a variety of systems. It gives you a good experience to interact with these systems that you may not normally be exposed to, right? It gives you a lot of broad experience across the stack. You know, we worked with ESXi systems, we worked with Zen server systems. We worked with KVM systems. We worked with Windows servers, 2003 boxes in some cases when you acquire an old practice and their entire infrastructure is running off some old Dell PowerEdge tower that's been sitting in the basement for 15 years.
Probably specific.
Yeah, a little bit. But I think it does give a lot of good insight as far as how systems are architected. And if you carry that into the cybersecurity field, you're going to, I think, have a natural inclination to know where to look better, to know what to watch out for as far as misconfigurations or potential attack vectors come into play. So I think there is a benefit to doing IT first, but not everyone is fortunate enough to take that career path. Not everybody wants to take that career path, right? Some people want to go straight into it, and I understand that. So it really depends, but I do think there is some benefit going from blue team to red team.
I hear the best path is actually be a phlebotomist first and then go to security, right, Holman?
That is definitely, you know what? People joke about this, but I've said it before, people in healthcare, we already know how to triage, right? So I think that transfers very well into cybersecurity. So yeah, no, that's a good one. Yeah, I've heard it before. Ha ha ha.
Well, Lou comes from a healthcare background, by the way, and I come from a healthcare background too, originally working in healthcare information technology. So I would generally concur with Dennis, but what I will say is this, right? Again, for the folks who are starting directly at the ground level with cybersecurity, the question is okay, do you do blue team cybersecurity? Do you do CTI security? Or do you do red team security, right? What I'll say to folks is that everyone tends to gravitate towards pen testing. Pen testing has a little bit of a higher barrier to entry than like being a SOC analyst, right? You much easier get a position as a SOC analyst, build some practical expertise there, and then get into red teaming. I would say that from a CTI perspective, you can more likely get a CTI entry level position than a entry level pen testing position. So usually someone doesn't start out as an entry level pen tester. That's not to say that they don't exist or anything like that, or you can't grow into that. It's just, it's a ramp. Right. And I think, Holman, right, that was you, right, is that you really were like, hey, I want that pen testing to be my first thing, right? And you threw a ton at it, right? And really got the books and did a ton on social media. I mean, if I may ask, right, for you to take that really aggressive hard ramp approach, which is paid off for you personally, right? But I mean, how long did it take you, and how much time did you have to invest almost every single day just to help like
wow. So the beginnings of me was I went to Ivy Tech, which a community college, and I grabbed a double associates in network infrastructure, similar to you. I went the network route, and then I fell into a collegiate cybersecurity team that traveled and did CTFs. And that was like my venture into it when I first started playing these CTF games with Team Samurai, who's globally ranked now. We go to DEF CON every year, yada, yada, yada. I didn't know what I was doing. I sat under their learning tree for like a year, right? As being the guy that set up their networks for the competitions. I asked questions, I had notes. How are you doing this? How are you doing that? I had that passion, that drive to like learn the technical aspect of it. So I sat there for a year doing that, and then all this the self-study, self-trainings on Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, all these things. And I fell into penetration testing just by happenstance because one of the guys that was on my team was a penetration tester, and he's like, "Man, you have a really good mind for this, even though you're not trained. I can see you doing this. Why don't we set the plan?" So we did that, and if you follow the story on LinkedIn, I did 87 interviews for penetration testing until I finally looked into my current gig. I just wasn't going to say I wasn't going to take no. That's why it's just you have to, if you want to try to. It's extremely difficult to get into penetration testing because it's not an entry level position. They say it is, but it's not.
How many on average hours a day did you really hit the books and do your training and whatnot?
About 9 hours a day. I chose to do that. I was out of work at the time. My wife, who was amazing, was a support system. I said, you know what? I want to do this. We're going to try to make it happen. And I treated it like a job. Like I clocked in every day at 8 a.m. and then I stopped at like 4 or 5. And that was just continuous for about a year and a half.
There you go, guys. Okay. Yeah. That's, by the way, thank you for really laying out that for everybody. That provides everyone a watermarker for like the amount of effort that if you want to try to go direct to network pen testing, right? Sometimes the amount of time, dedication, and energy that's going to go into it, right? So a lot of times I'll see people go for, again, kind of a, if they're trying to expedite things in regards to just getting some revenue, right? They're trying to kind of just pay the bills and whatnot first, the SOC analysts and the CTI stuff first there. And Holman, if I may, to this next question, I think that this is great for you and your progression. What are some of the factors that you look for that differentiates a junior versus a senior level pen tester? How can someone tell whether they're ready to apply for a senior pen tester position?
Wow, this is an excellent question, because the actual penetration testing role, even though it states entry level, right? You have to know your networking, you have to know your encryption, you have to know a little bit of web app sometimes. Some companies throw these web app tests at you also as well. There's so much that you have to know even to just start off as a penetration tester. I myself, I'm nowhere near the ability of a senior level penetration tester. And I think the biggest thing that you have to do with yourself is step back and be able to self-assess where you're at and take a hard look at the truth of the matter of where you are, and I think you have to take your ego out of it, and you have to be willing to say, hey, I don't know everything. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not supposed to be at about a year of doing this, right? I'm at 6 months in of just being entry level with web app. So network was something I did on the side. I'm not even in that position right now. What I'm doing is web application testing. So back to your question, I would say you really, man, you have to know a little bit of everything, but with penetration testing, you can't stop learning. So I think it's really at the eye of the beholder where you think you're going to be at. I can speak to the beginnings of it. I'm nowhere near senior, but entry level is definitely, when they say entry level penetration testing, it's not an entry level position. People get that confused, on LinkedIn to say entry level this, entry level that, but you have to know all your fundamentals, like you talked about earlier, your fundamentals, right? Your networking, your things like that, your IT, all those things are great ventures to get into penetration testing. If I can go back and do it again, I would definitely probably, I guess that sounds stupid, but study more, even though I was taking nine hours a day. I feel like I don't know enough. And I think that's the smart thing when you don't know enough.
Dude, that what's that phrase? As the shores of our knowledge grow, so does the ocean of our ignorance. Something like that. I always mess up phrases and analogies.
No, that's it. That's it.
Oh, fantastic. So, I would say if I was going to use a rough dowsing rod to say if someone was senior pen tester or not. And by the way, I don't consider myself senior pen testing level knowledge or expertise, right? Like, I am now in a role of from an executive management, running a cybersecurity company and that kind of stuff, and knowing just enough where I can evaluate if someone's senior or not. So I'm just dangerous enough there. But if somebody can't explain to me how they can take an iOS application, right, and perform dynamic and static application security testing on it and penetration testing on that mobile application and all the API endpoints that are associated with it every step of the way, then I wouldn't consider them at any level of the definition senior, right? They should be able to tell me how they're able to obtain the application, decompile the application, how they perform the SAS analysis, the DAS analysis, static application security testing, dynamic application security testing, and then pulling those API endpoints, how to do the API pen testing, how API pen testing is completely different than web app pen testing, how it's similar in certain ways, right? If they can't explain that full through and through in the tools that they are using every step of the way, not senior. That's what I would say. Dennis, did you want to add to that?
I did want to bring up actually 2 points, not specifically to that, but to Michael's point about how hard it is to get in. So I don't know if Travis had anything else or anything else you want to add on that topic, but I can hold off.
No, I am not a senior pen tester, Dennis.
All right. Well,
you by any means, go for it.
No, I was just going to say, as far as the how hard it is to get into it, I completely agree with Michael. What I would say specifically, I don't think you guys even know this. I don't think Travis or Christian, I don't think you guys know this, but I actually probably about I want to say maybe a year before I applied with you guys, I actually did apply for a junior pen test position, and it was an entry level position at Zynga, which does like the, you know, the Farmville and stuff like that. And I want to say that it was right after I got OSWE, right? So I had Web Expert, and they denied me. They would not even talk to me, and that was an entry level junior
Really?
position. Yeah, and so I don't know what they wanted for the entry level position, if not one of the higher, you know, web expert certifications from offensive security. I have no idea, but it is very hard. And I think the reason why I was actually denied is because I had no prior experience to it, right? They say it's entry level, but really they expect you to have some level of knowledge as far as, you know, you've had past experience doing it. Yeah, you know, I did database operations and I did, you know, system administration, but I didn't really have any official pen test experience besides some certification. So to Michael's point, yeah, they blatantly lie when they say it's entry level position. It does not surprise me at all that it took so many interviews to actually get into a position, because and they're going to have to stop. The industry, quite frankly, is going to have to stop being picky about it, because otherwise you're just, I would say, accepting people who are, you know, obviously you don't want to hire like people who are giving bad advice, right? But having some people who know a little bit is better than having nobody at all, because if you have nobody at all, I mean, what are you doing for security? You're not doing anything. I think also the problem, quite frankly, is that they don't give people who know things an opportunity to apply, right? I think the bigger problem is that some people may present and they may have some level of qualifications or personal expertise, but they don't have the certificates or the job experience to necessarily back that up. I mean, look at me. I don't have a college degree. I don't have any sort of pen test experience besides maybe some certifications. And you know, I don't know. It's just, I feel like the industry has moved away from that. And a final point, if I can, Michael, what was your CTF team name? Because I've participated in quite a few CTFs, and I almost wonder if I went up against you.
You might have a Team Samurai with Chris Eagle and some other people that are maybe.
I'll take a look at that. I'll look at some of the
Okay.
past CTFs I did.
I'll send you my
play it up here.
CTF time link if you want afterwards. So
Yeah, that'll work.
Gents, when it comes to CTF stuff, I know nothing about CTFs. I think we should do a cyber judo course on getting started with CTFs and how they're similar and how they're different than like pen tests and that kind of stuff. I think that would be really neat. And then also, I would love to talk about the network setups for those, right? And because I like to have a lot of fun from a defensive standpoint, and fucking around with people who are infiltrating networks and creating like fake false paths and like honeypots and that kind of stuff, right? And I will tell you what, I would love to do, you know, to Ryan Johnson's point about like zero trust architecture for things, right? I love doing zero trust network architecture stuff where you do BGP all the way down to the servers, right? So it's micro segmented to that level. So anyways, super cool. So couple quick lightning round things, because we're just about at time here. So somebody asked about malware analysis. I posted the SANS 4610 on that. I've heard that's a good starting path there. My background expertise in malware analysis is very limited. I've done a lot of general forensic analysis around threat intelligence and identifying, quote unquote, the scene of a crime, who, what, where, why, and how, right? And usually, you know, from like a high level malware reverse engineering standpoint, I would very much rely on hybrid analysis and Joe's sandbox to assist me, right? Because I was a noob at the time, but they're fantastic tools. Still look into them, still leverage them. But the SANS 4610 I've heard is really good. Also, someone asked about how to make a their resume like stand out, because, you know, hey, there's a lot of applicants and whatnot. We've had a pretty good session on that and some materials and content about creating a resume that kind of stands out. Honestly, take a look at everyone else's resumes and then look at yours and then think about what's going to jump off the page. Honestly, things that jump off the page to me is when somebody puts, like, again, what projects they're working on, when you link to your GitHub repos, right? Some of the things that you're doing outside of your regular job role. If you have, by the way, old other jobs, right, that are not directly in technology and cybersecurity, find a way for them to relate, right, those experiences to what you're doing today and how that makes you better, right? For example, even if you did, let's say, you worked in the fast food industry or something like that. There's still a lot that you can learn from that opportunity. Apply what you've learned as practical skills to any job you have, which is, well, hey, working in stressful situations, right? Learning how to expedite things on the fly, managing multiple obligations and expectations at the same time, right? Having to engage in a lot of customer communications, right? Like those are things that you can take from any other job and then reapply it. So if you got your, even like as you're transitioning from something that's a completely different industry, different job type, right? Just write down the bullet points under that job of how it's armed you, how you're leveraging what you learned from that, right, into your new career. People love that. HR people love that. And it is real, right? So I would say that that's a really great thing to have there. And then have it be a bit more personal. I like put pictures in my resumes of the individual, whatnot. It shows a little bit of, again, kind of like the person's passionate. They're, you know, they're maybe better on their soft skills. Having a nice layout that's easy to read, I think is always really important. I always like to recommend visual CV. It's helpful for building good cover letters and resumes that are really aesthetically pleasing and beautiful, right? That's going to help land you that initial, like, getting in the door, and that interview. The interviews are going to be the more challenging part, right? Like Holman said, he did 87 interviews till he got to his fantastic gig, right? And you guys can see like his soft skills are down pat. So make sure that you really think about the rest of the interview process of do your research on the company, make sure you ask good questions of them, understand who you're speaking to so you can speak at the same level of them. Are they a technical person? Are they a high level, more management type of person? That kind of stuff. That's going to set you up for success when you're going through those interviews. Travis, did you want to poke out one, or we can maybe piece out one more question before we let everybody go?
Yeah, one easy one was recommended resources for someone beginning their learning journey into cloud pen testing. Here, there's only one you need. Here it is. If you're going to start with one place, the guy who made Hack Tricks, who is a genius, and if you're not familiar with that, hacktricks.xyz is an incredible resource. Version 2 of Hack Tricks came out not too long ago, all about cloud. And it's not just his book, but he's also got references to all these other great resources to go through. So if that's something that you're interested in poking at, that's your place to start.
Okay, wonderful. Then before I jump off here, Travis, mostly because I get a bit of brain fog and there's a lot of things going on. What are we looking at for next Wednesday's session? Not certain yet? Okay.
Man, I don't know.
Well, it'll be like a Kinder Surprise egg. We'll find something great for everybody that's enjoyable. So no worries to that. So stay tuned, team. Everyone, is Hack the Box worth sinking my time into? I mean, I usually tell people try try Hack Me is better to start out with than Hack the Box, because it's kind of like a more of a step by step, right? And once Try Hack Me, kind of you kind of get through that, and that starts to kind of get old where you don't need to kind of be educated every step of the way. Then probably that's where Hack the Box would come in.
I would say to that point, yeah, I just did some Hack the Box labs. I did easy and I did some moderate, and I'm working on a hard one tonight. I would say to that point, absolutely, Christian's right. Try Hack Me is going to be much more easy to get into. Hack the Box is going to kind of throw you in and hope that you can swim.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious. It seems like a really fun resource.
Yeah, certainly, not a problem. And then one last really important question, Abhijit put in the chat right at the top. Biggest question is, do you stop eating pizza after you burn your tongue with hot cheese, burst pizza? Okay, as being a New Yorker, we got this thin sliced pizza, right? And they'll slap it on with all that tomato sauce and cheese and loads of grease. And when you go to eat it, you take your pie slice and you fold it, and then you kind of dump the hot cheese grease into your mouth there, and you just kind of chug it, right? And you got to go through the pain. So certainly, I would say you don't stop. You don't stop until it's gone, right? That's how it at least works for New Yorkers here. So that being said, team, everyone, thank you guys so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We'll be following up with the next Wednesday's session in the next couple of days here. Have a great night. Bye.
Thank you. You have a good one.
Hey guys.